Today, I'm going to be talking about how I built my setup. I got my first ever gaming setup when I was around 6. It was an Xbox 360 in a random room in my house connected to a TV. This obviously wasn't an actual setup. No thought went into it at all, but I still loved it so much. It was perfect to play on back then. Then a few years went by, and around 2017, I got one of those beds with a desk under it. I know every single person knows what I mean. And this setup was actually pretty good. I had an actual monitor with an Xbox One, and this was when I started to get properly into gaming. I was playing stuff like FIFA, and then a few months after I actually built it, Fortnite obviously came out, which I started grinding a lot. Again, it wasn't the best. However, it did the job, and again, I really enjoyed using it. Then a couple of years went by, and around 2019, I actually got a new bed because I'd had that bed for ages. So I decided I'd get a new one, and I also, with that, got a new desk. And this desk was basically just this black one. It was a very simple desk, but it did the job. I basically had my Xbox, a monitor, and then I also got a TV above my setup. The only picture I've got is a setup I built on top of this. It was around 2020. And this was when lockdown actually happened. So in this setup, I had a newer Xbox, which was the Series S. And I also had my laptop set up for online lessons. And I'd also saved up for a keyboard and a mouse, but I also had an Elite controller, which I used mainly for gaming, obviously. But then later on that year, I got pretty bored of that setup. And I actually watched a Vermax video, one of his I think it was one of his first setup videos. And basically, he had 2 IKEA desks. They were like Lindemann tabletops with Adils on the bottom, set up in an L shape. And honestly, I really loved the way this looked. So I decided to buy that myself, and I made that setup. The only picture I've got of that setup is this. I loved this setup so much as well. This was when I started to really get into actually making a good gaming setup. I'd also upgraded my monitor to work with 120 FPS. And I also bought an LED strip for the back of it. Then in December of 2021, I also got a gaming PC, which obviously allowed me to make content, and it made it much easier to game. And I also had moved the setup to the other side of my room into the space where my current setup is now, because I think it looks a lot better. So then we're brought to around March of 2022. So again, a few years later, I actually decided to cut a piece of one of the desks off and then have them in sort of like a line against the wall. I think this made it definitely look a lot better. However, the only thing with that was I had to have my setup on one singular desk. I also used my old monitor from around 2017 in one of my first ever setups as a second monitor. You can actually go and see the process of building this setup on my channel. And then over the past 8 months recently, I actually stopped gaming. I'd use my setup for at most 30 minutes a day. And you can actually see this in my channel. I literally stopped uploading for about 8 months. But finally, at the end of November, I actually built my dream setup. I bought a bunch of new things at once, including an Xbox, a monitor, a desk, and also some light. There's also this setup being built on my channel. So finally, I'm going to answer the question, how did I actually afford this? So for all the setups before the one I'm currently using, they were obviously paid for by money I'd saved up from birthdays, Christmases, and for doing odd jobs around the house. Those setups took years to build because obviously I'd buy them in like installments, which is why in my opinion I was never like fully satisfied with these setups. So that's why I decided to build the setup I've got right now, which I've actually wanted for years. I saw a video from Casp of him building his setup, and honestly this motivated me so much. It inspired me. But again, I waited literal years to save up the money and see when I actually wanted to buy it. Then a few months ago, I actually got my first job, in which I worked countless hours saving me money to buy this one. I'm so happy with the setup I have now, and the answer might be very boring, but it is just that simple. I got a job. I do plan to keep improving my setup over the next few years, including a new PC and hopefully a new keyboard soon. If there's any advice I can give someone who's planning on building a setup, honestly, I would just say save up, plan exactly the setup you want, and build it at once. I wouldn't recommend building it in like installments because you're always going to see something you'd like to improve over the time. And then the final piece of advice I can give is look on YouTube and TikTok for inspiration, because trust me, that's how you're going to find the setup you like. But I would definitely look for inspiration. For example, with my desk, I took huge inspiration from Vermax and Casp. And then for separate parts, obviously like my mouse, my keyboard, stuff like that, they were taken from different places. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out so much more than you think.